Daniel had always believed that the desert understood him better than people did. It held silence the way he wished his heart could. It never demanded anything from him, never asked questions he couldn't answer, never reminded him of the mistakes he tried to forget. Working alone on the ranch suited him. It kept him far from the noise of town, far from the complicated feelings he wasn't ready to face again after his last relationship ended in a way that left him quiet, guarded, and unsure of where he belonged. On a warm afternoon, the sky stretched endlessly above him as he rode along the old fence line. The ranch owner had mentioned a few loose posts out near the dried creek bed, so Daniel volunteered to check them. He preferred tasks like this work that didn't require talking, thinking, or feeling more than necessary. His horse walked steadily, hooves brushing against the sandy ground. The air filled with soft waves of heat. He slowed when he reached the creek bed. Most of the year, it held no water. Only memories of the rare monsoon storms that brought life for a short time. But today, something new caught his eye. Someone sitting on a rock at the edge of the dried stream, still and calm like part of the land itself. It was a young Apache woman. Daniel stopped his horse a few steps away, unsure if he should speak first. She didn't seem startled by his presence. Instead, she lifted her face gently toward him, the sunlight touching her dark hair and giving her an almost peaceful glow. She wasn't dressed like a tourist or hiker. She wore simple clothes suited for the desert, nothing fancy, nothing loud, just practical and quiet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel felt something unusual in the air, not tension, not awkwardness, but a kind of calm curiosity. As if she had been expecting someone, though not necessarily him. "Afternoon," Daniel said finally, trying not to sound too stiff. She nodded in return. "Afternoon." He waited for her to say more, but she didn't. Her eyes went back to the ground, studying something he couldn't see. Before he could stop himself, he asked, "You all right out here?" She looked up again, her eyes steady and thoughtful. "I know this land. I'm visiting my grandmother's paths." Daniel nodded slowly, not fully understanding but respecting the sincerity in her words. He had grown up hearing bits and pieces about the cultures that lived here long before the ranch ever existed, but hearing it directly from someone, in such a gentle tone, felt different. "You're tracing old trails?" he asked. She smiled just slightly, a soft curve of the lips. "Yes. We follow the places our people walked. It helps us remember who we are." Daniel didn't know what to reply. He wasn't used to people speaking in ways that carried meaning without needing many words. So he asked the only thing that came naturally. "Doesn't it get lonely out here by yourself?" Her eyes stayed locked on his, calm and unreadable. "Lonely?" she repeated quietly. "The land is company. Not the kind that talks, but the kind that listens." Daniel felt something stir inside him, something he couldn't name. Maybe it was because he often felt heard only by the quiet desert, too. She finally stood up, brushing the dust from her hands. She was smaller than he first thought, but there was a strength in the way she held herself. A quiet confidence. Grounded and steady. She stepped closer, not enough to make him uncomfortable, but enough to show she wasn't afraid. She looked at him with an expression that wasn't bold or playful, just honest. "You need a woman like me," she said softly. "One who understands silence." Daniel blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. People didn't usually speak so directly. At first, he thought she must be joking, but her expression carried no humor, only sincerity. He laughed a little, more from surprise than amusement. "And why do you think that?" She didn't smile, but her eyes warmed slightly. "You look like a man who carries too many thoughts. A woman who talks too much would drown you, but I don't drown anyone." Daniel didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to anyone reading him so easily. No one in town ever spoke to him like that. Most people saw him as a quiet ranch worker. Nothing special. Someone who lived simply, kept his head down, did his job, and went home. But this woman, someone he had known for only a few minutes, looked at him in a way that felt like she could see past the layers he tried so hard to hide. He tried to break the moment with humor. "You think you know me already?" She shook her head gently. No, but the land tells me some things. The way you ride, the way you breathe when you look around. You listen more than you speak. Daniel hadn't realized anyone would ever notice such things. He grew quiet, feeling unexpectedly seen. "What's your name?" he asked, clearing his throat. "Alina," she replied. "And you?" "Daniel." She nodded, repeating his name once in a thoughtful whisper. "Daniel." It sounded different when she said it. Softer, almost meaningful. He glanced at the sun dipping lower. "You need a ride back? I can take you closer to town, or—" She raised her hand gently, not to stop him but to show she understood his concern. "I walk. My grandmother taught me the paths. They lead me safely." "They lead me safely." He hesitated, but her confidence reassured him. She stepped back, preparing to continue her journey along the dry creek bed. Before she left, she gave him one last look, steady, warm, and certain. "If the land brings us together again, it will be because you are meant to understand something." Daniel's brows lifted. "Understand what?" Her expression softened into something almost tender. "Yourself." Then she turned and walked away, her steps silent on the sand. She didn't look back, yet Daniel felt something familiar settle in his chest, a quiet feeling, as if he had known her for far longer than a single afternoon. He watched her until she disappeared behind the curve of the canyon wall. His horse shifted beneath him as if urging him to move on. But Daniel stayed still for a long while, staring at the path she took. Something about her words lingered like a soft echo. "You need a woman like me." He didn't take it seriously at the time. It sounded too sudden, too strange, too bold to believe. But as he rode back toward the ranch, he couldn't stop replaying the moment. The calm steadiness in her voice, the warmth in her gaze, the quiet understanding she carried with her, it all settled into him deeper than he expected. He didn't know it yet, but the land had indeed brought them together for a reason. And even though he tried to convince himself it was just a brief encounter, something inside him already knew the truth. This wasn't the last time he would see her. And somewhere deep within him, though he didn't admit it out loud, a faint, unfamiliar thought whispered, maybe she was right. Maybe he did need a woman like her. Maybe he had needed her long before he knew her name. In the days that followed, Daniel tried to go back to his usual routine, but it didn't feel the same anymore. He still woke up early, fed the horses, repaired fences, checked the wells, and handled all the jobs the ranch required. Yet something in him had shifted. Even if he couldn't describe it, his mind wandered more than before. His thoughts didn't stay focused on work the way they used to. Every quiet moment seemed to carry an echo of that afternoon by the dried creek bed and the Apache woman who had spoken to him in a way no one else ever had. Sometimes her words came back to him at the most random times, while he was tightening a fence wire, while he was washing dust off his hands, or even while he was riding in silence. "You need a woman like me." He would shake his head and try to laugh at it. But the truth was, he didn't laugh. He remembered her calm eyes, her steady voice, and the strange comfort she carried with her. He remembered how she listened. Really listened. Something most people couldn't do. A few afternoons later, Daniel took his horse along the river trail. He told himself he was simply checking the lower water lines for leaks. But deep down, he knew he was hoping quietly, secretly, that he might see her again. He even felt a little foolish for letting his mind drift that way. Yet when he reached the bend, where cottonwood trees leaned over the water, he slowed without realizing it. And there she was. Alina stood by the river, her back turned to him, her hair moving gently with the breeze. She looked peaceful, almost like she was part of the land itself, blending into the calm surroundings. Daniel's heart reacted in a way he didn't expect. Half nervous, half relieved. He cleared his throat so he wouldn't surprise her. She turned around instantly, her expression softening when she recognized him. "You again," she said gently, not as a complaint, not as surprise, just a simple acknowledgement that felt strangely warm. "Seems like the land brought us together one more time," Daniel replied, trying to sound casual, even though it felt anything but casual. She gave a small smile and nodded. "Maybe you needed more understanding." Her words caught him off guard again. She had a way of saying things that made him feel seen, as if she could read the quiet parts of him that no one else paid attention to. He dismounted, letting his horse drink from the river while he approached her slowly. "So, you come here often?" he asked, knowing how silly it sounded the moment it left his mouth. Alina looked at the flowing water. "Not often. Only when I need to think." "What about today?" he asked. She took a moment before answering. "I was remembering my grandmother. She used to walk this river path. When I miss her, I come here." The honesty in her voice touched him. Daniel wasn't used to people sharing personal feelings so simply. He never asked for such things from others, and he never shared much about himself. But somehow, Alina's presence made the silence feel safe enough to speak into. "I lost someone too," Daniel said after a moment. "Not to passing away, but to life going in different directions. It still sits with me sometimes." Alina didn't ask for details. She didn't push him to explain. She simply listened, her attention quiet and complete. And Daniel felt more understood in that moment than he had been in years. She finally said, "Pain changes the way we walk through the world. But it doesn't make us weak." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the comfort those words gave him. He didn't know how she always found the right thing to say without effort. They walked along the river together, not too close but not far either. The breeze carried the scent of warm earth and distant pine. Small pebbles shifted under their feet as they moved. Their conversation wasn't rushed. Every pause felt natural, not empty. Daniel asked, "Do you live nearby?" Alina nodded. "Yes, my family stays within our community. I go out to walk the old trails, but home is close." He hesitated before asking the next question. "Do they know you walk alone?" She glanced at him with a meaningful smile. "Of course. My people walk with purpose. Fear doesn't guide us unless danger is real. And the land is not danger. Most outsiders only fear it because they don't understand it." Daniel nodded. "I guess that makes sense. I always felt calm out here, even before I met you." "Then the land chose you well," she said simply. They reached a bend where the water shimmered brighter. Alina stopped, crouching to pick up a smooth stone shaped by the flow of time. She held it gently in her palm and turned it over. "My grandmother told me something once," she said, still studying the stone. She said, "People who listen to the land carry an old soul, even if they are born far from our people." She looked at him. "You have that." Daniel felt a soft warmth move through his chest. He had never been described that way in his entire life. Most people barely noticed him. But Alina's words made him feel like he mattered in a quiet, meaningful way. He asked, "How do you know so much just by looking at someone?" "Because I don't only look," she replied. "I pay attention." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable at all. It was the kind that gently settled over two people who didn't need to fill every moment with sound. As they walked back toward the main trail, Daniel found himself talking more than he expected. He told her about his work on the ranch, about how he came to live there after leaving town, about the peace he found in simple routines. Alina listened without interrupting, her eyes following him with quiet understanding. She shared parts of her life too. She spoke about her community, how traditions were passed down through stories and everyday practices. She spoke of wanting to honor those traditions, while also creating a life of her choosing a balance she sometimes struggled with. Daniel noticed something in her voice when she talked about it, a kind of gentle sadness, like someone who carried expectations she didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. He didn't judge her for it. He simply listened, letting her speak freely. At one point, she stopped walking and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You carry weight in your heart," she said softly. "But you carry it quietly so others won't feel it. That is kindness, but also loneliness." Cooled, Daniel swallowed, unable to find a reply right away. Her words reached deeper than anything he was prepared for. "I don't know how you do that," he finally whispered. "How you read people so easily." Alina shook her head gently. "I don't read people. I feel what they don't say." Daniel let out a slow breath, realizing he had never met anyone like her. Not in town, not in his past, not anywhere. When they reached the place where their paths separated, she turned to him and said, "We will meet again, not because of chance, but because it is time you learn what connection feels like when it doesn't demand anything from you." He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Do you really think that's what I need?" She held his gaze with warmth. "Yes. You need someone who speaks softly but understands deeply." He felt the meaning behind her words settle gently into his heart, like a seed planted in quiet soil. As she walked away, Daniel watched her until she became a small shape moving through the sunlit path. His horse snorted softly beside him, as if sensing the shift in his mood. Daniel whispered to himself, almost afraid to say it aloud, "She's different. She's something else." And though he didn't want to admit it, he already knew something important. He wasn't just drawn to her calmness. He was drawn to the way she made him feel seen. He didn't know where this connection would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to meet her again. For a while, meeting Alina became a quiet routine in Daniel's life. One he didn't plan, but one he welcomed more each day. Sometimes he found her near the river. Sometimes near the wide canyon path where the earth opened into warm tones of red and gold. Other times he spotted her walking along the old trails with a slow, thoughtful pace. And each time, she greeted him with the same calm warmth, as if she had always known he would come. Their bond grew silently, without loud words or promises. They simply talked, listened, and shared small pieces of life. Alina showed him how to read the direction of the wind by watching the grass move. She explained how animals left different-shaped marks in the dust. She even told him stories her grandmother used to share, simple stories about the land, the sky, and the balance of life. Her stories didn't feel like lessons. But Daniel learned so much without realizing it. In return, Daniel opened up about himself more than he expected. He told her about his worries, the mistakes from his past, the long, quiet years he spent keeping his heart locked because he didn't trust himself anymore. She never judged him. She never tried to change his feelings. She simply held space for them, as if silence itself was her way of offering comfort. But good things rarely grow without challenges, and their peaceful connection soon began to face the pressure of the world around them. One afternoon, Daniel was repairing the barn roof with two other ranch workers, Mark and Jesse, men who liked to talk more than they worked. They had noticed Daniel slipping away more often, sometimes disappearing for hours in the direction of the river or canyon. It didn't take them long to start teasing him. "So," Mark said, leaning on his hammer, "you've been wandering around a lot lately. Got yourself a secret hobby we should know about?" Jesse laughed. "Nah. He's got himself a secret someone. I've seen him riding toward the old trails." "That's not work direction, that's romance direction." Daniel tried to stay quiet, but of course, that didn't help. Mark smirked. "He's been meeting that Apache woman. Saw her once near the creek. Pretty eyes. Calm voice. Different kind of girl. That right, Daniel?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't want to drag Alina into the ranch gossip. "She's a friend," he said simply, hoping that would end the conversation. But of course, it didn't. "A friend?" Jesse laughed. "Buddy, trust me. Women don't say stuff like, 'You need someone like me,' unless they mean more than friendship." We heard stories about her people. Strong traditions, strong opinions. "You sure you want to mix yourself up in all that?" Daniel didn't like the tone. It wasn't cruel, but it carried assumptions, the kind that people make when they don't know better. He felt heat rise in his chest. He didn't snap. Anger wasn't his nature. But he felt protective in a way he hadn't felt for anyone in a long time. "She's a good person," he said quietly. "Shows more respect than most people I know." That shut them up for a moment, but Daniel could feel their eyes on him, judging, misunderstanding. By evening, he rode home with a heavy heart. He wasn't ashamed of Alina, not even close, but he worried that she might face discomfort because of him. He didn't want her name wrapped in careless jokes. The next day, Alina asked him to walk with her along a trail where tall golden grass moved softly with the wind. She sensed something wrong even before he tried hiding it. "You're breathing differently," she said quietly. What troubles you? Daniel sighed. People at the ranch. They noticed I've been spending time with you. And this is bad? She asked gently. It's not what they said. It's how they said it. They think we're too different. They think I won't understand your traditions. And I don't want you to deal with that. Alina kept walking, her steps slow and steady. She didn't seem hurt, just thoughtful. Different isn't wrong, she said softly. It is simply different. But what if I make mistakes? Daniel whispered. What if I do something wrong without knowing? I don't want to disrespect your world. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Her eyes were calm but serious in a gentle way. Mistakes don't break respect, she said. Only lack of care does. And you care. Daniel wanted to believe that, but something still bothered him. I stepped into a ceremonial space last week. Remember? Your cousin looked upset. I didn't even know what it was. Alina nodded slowly. My cousin wasn't upset. She was surprised. Outsiders rarely come close to that place. But she knew you didn't understand. We explained it to her. But I felt stupid. Daniel murmured, his voice tight. I felt like I didn't belong there. Alina's expression softened. She stepped closer, not touching him, but standing near enough that her presence felt grounding. It is not stupid to not know, she said. It is only human. Learning happens through humility, not fear. Daniel looked down at the ground. He couldn't deny how much her words soothed him. She always had a way of breaking heavy thoughts into smaller, more bearable pieces. But what about your family? He asked quietly. Do they approve of you spending time with someone like me? She tilted her head slightly. Some worry because they want me to stay close to our traditions. But worry is not dislike. They just need time to understand who you are. Daniel hesitated. And who am I to them? She gave him a soft smile. Someone who listens. Someone with a quiet heart. That is enough. He didn't speak for a while, letting her words sink in. It humbled him deeply that she saw qualities in him that he rarely saw in himself. They continued walking, letting the tall grass brush against their legs. The sun warmed their faces. Birds moved from branch to branch in the mesquite trees nearby. Everything felt peaceful, until they reached a small rise in the land where they could see the edge of Alina's community in the distance. Simple homes, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing. Daniel slowed down. Something inside him tightened. That's your world, he said quietly. And mine is over there. He pointed behind him, toward the wide-open ranch land. Feels like two different maps. Alina's voice softened. Maps can meet at the edges. But what if the edges don't fit? He whispered. She stepped closer again, her eyes gentle and steady. They will fit if the people walking them choose patience. Not force. Not fear. Patience. Daniel didn't reply. His heart felt full but uneasy. Like two forces pulling in different directions, his desire to be close to her, and his fear of hurting her or disappointing her family. Seeing his struggle, Alina spoke again. Do you trust me? He lifted his eyes to hers. Yes. Then trust this too, she said softly. Our connection is real. It walks at its own pace. Let it grow without fear. For the first time, Daniel noticed a faint sadness in her expression. Not because of him, but because she understood the challenges they faced. She lived between worlds, her traditions and her hopes, and Daniel realized she carried that weight every day. He knew he cared for her deeply. He didn't have to say it for the feeling to be true. But caring wasn't always enough to make things easy. As they returned to the river, Daniel felt something shift inside him. He wasn't afraid of Alina. He wasn't afraid of what he felt around her. He was afraid of losing her because of something he didn't understand or couldn't predict. When they reached the water, she looked at him with quiet certainty. Daniel, she said in a gentle tone, our path will not be without questions, but it will also not be without answers. We will find them together. He swallowed hard, feeling something warm settle in his chest. I just don't want to hurt you, he whispered. You won't, she said. Not if you walk with care. And you walk with care by nature. He didn't reply, but his eyes held the answer. She must have seen it, because her expression softened into something almost hopeful. As they parted that evening, Daniel watched her walk away, her steps slow and graceful. This time, however, he didn't feel the simple comfort of knowing they would meet again. He felt something else, a growing responsibility, a desire to understand her world, not just admire it from a distance, a fear of failing, but most of all, a deeper feeling he wasn't ready to name yet. He just knew one thing. He didn't want to lose her. Not now. Not ever. Days passed quietly after Daniel and Alina's long talk. But the air around them felt different now. Their connection was growing stronger, deeper, and more meaningful, yet it also carried a quiet weight. Daniel tried to be patient, tried to let things grow naturally, but deep down, he still feared doing something wrong. Still, he wanted to learn, to understand her world better, and to show her he respected everything she valued. He wished life would slow down long enough for him to gather his thoughts, but the ranch rarely offered such kindness. One morning, a faint smell of rain drifted across the land, unexpected for that season. By afternoon, the sky shifted to a heavy gray, and the wind began to move in irregular gusts. Old cowboys called it a desert warning, the kind that came before sudden storms. Daniel had ridden out earlier to check the south fence line, and didn't realize how quickly the weather was changing behind him. By late afternoon, the clouds rolled in with surprising force, stretching low across the sky like dark waves. The ranch radio crackled with static as someone called out, "A storm's coming fast. Anyone out on the flats needs to head back now." Alina heard the broadcast from a friend's porch. Her breath tightened immediately. She knew Daniel was working near the area where storms often caused unexpected trouble, flooded dips, loose rocks, or spooked horses. The wind grew sharper, and she felt something shift inside her, something instinctive and urgent. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her light jacket and began walking toward the trail that connected the ranch edge to the old canyon roots. Her feet moved quickly, guided not by panic but by a deep sense that Daniel might need her. Clouds thickened above her, and the desert grew darker, the light fading in a strange, uneven way. The wind kicked dust into the air, making it hard to see far ahead. She wrapped a scarf around her mouth and nose and kept going. Each step felt guided by something stronger than fear, something like loyalty, something like care. Meanwhile, Daniel was struggling to guide his horse through the rising wind. The air had turned rough, swirling around them like a moving wall. The horse snorted and shifted nervously, sensing the storm's tension. When a sudden gust blew across the flats, it startled the animal, causing it to jerk sideways. Daniel tried to steady it, but the ground was uneven. In the confusion, his foot slipped from the stirrup, and he stumbled, landing hard on one knee. He gritted his teeth but forced himself up. The sky cracked with a faint rumble, not thunder, just the deep voice of a storm gathering strength. He knew he had to get back, but the wind was too strong now, pushing him in unpredictable directions. He tried calming the horse, but the dust swirling around made it restless. "Easy," he whispered, placing a steady hand on its neck. "Easy, girl. We're gonna get home. Our mount. Come from. Our mount, Tom." But the horse's fear grew, and in one sharp motion it pulled away from him, running off toward safer ground. Daniel reached out instinctively, but only caught air. He didn't blame the animal, it was doing what instinct told it. But now he was alone in fast-rising wind, on foot, miles away from the ranch. He took a slow breath, trying not to let worry take over. He had been through storms before. He knew how to handle himself, but this storm felt different, almost too sudden, too heavy. He wrapped his arms around himself and continued walking, hoping to find a sheltered spot or a clearer path. Alina reached the first ridge just as the wind grew even stronger. She crouched behind a rock, shielding her eyes from the dust. Through the swirling air she could make out shapes, bushes bending, sand lifting, the sky turning nearly purple with storm clouds. She listened, letting instinct guide her. The wind carried faint, unusual sounds, movement that wasn't natural to the land. Her pulse quickened. She moved forward again, her steps steady even in the shifting ground. She scanned the open flats, hoping to see a figure, any sign of Daniel. When she finally spotted something near the base of a low hill, her heart jumped. A person, moving slowly, against the wind. She rushed down the ridge, calling out over the rising storm. Daniel! He heard his name but couldn't tell where it came from. He turned in every direction, until he finally saw her rushing toward him, her hair blowing wildly behind her. Relief washed over him so suddenly that he exhaled more deeply than he realized. Alina? He called back, half disbelieving she was actually there. When she reached him, she stopped just a few steps away and looked him over quickly. You're hurt, she said softly, noticing the stiffness in his leg. It's nothing, he replied. Just twisted my knee a bit. Her eyes held a steady, concerned warmth. You should not be out here alone. He almost laughed at the irony. I wasn't planning on staying. The storm changed too fast. My horse ran off. Alina looked up at the sky. We need shelter before the wind grows stronger. There is a small overhang near the old rock trail. Can you walk? I can manage, he said. She walked beside him, matching her steps to his, keeping a careful watch for loose rocks or shifting patches of sand, even through the storm's growing intensity. Daniel felt strangely calmer with her near, like she carried a quiet shield of focus around them. When they reached the rock overhang, it offered enough protection to block the worst of the wind. Daniel sat down slowly, testing his knee. It hurt, but not enough to worry him. Alina sat beside him, her breathing soft and even despite the long walk. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm roared outside, wind whistling past the rock, dust swirling like a wild dance. Yet inside the small shelter, the air felt strangely warm, almost peaceful. You came looking for me, Daniel said quietly, still trying to understand the depth of her instinct. Alina nodded. I felt you needed someone. He exhaled softly. You were right. She looked at him with gentle seriousness. Needing someone is not a weakness. It is the beginning of trust. Daniel lowered his eyes. The words touched a place inside him he rarely let anyone reach. He tried to speak but had no idea what to say. Instead, he let the silence hold his feelings. After a moment, Alina continued. You carry everything alone. Even your fear. Even your tiredness. Daniel swallowed, his voice low. I didn't want to make you worry. I chose to worry, she replied softly. Because your safety matters to me. Something in him softened suddenly, like a knot loosening. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The quiet strength. The calm certainty. The warmth she offered without asking anything in return. I don't know how you do it, he whispered. How you always know what I need before I say anything. It is not magic, she replied. It is paying attention to a heart that speaks quietly. The storm continued outside. But inside the shelter, everything felt still. Daniel leaned back against the rock wall, feeling the weight inside him settle into something gentler. You saved me today, he said softly. Alina shook her head. No, you saved yourself. I only walked to you. But Daniel knew it wasn't that simple. She had seen the signs, trusted her instincts, and stepped into the storm without hesitation. Not out of duty, not out of kindness alone, out of connection, and that meant more to him than he could express. As the wind slowly weakened and the storm began to pass, Daniel realized something important, something he had been afraid to acknowledge until now. He didn't just care for Alina. He didn't just admire her. He needed her in a way that was deeper than anything he had felt in years, maybe ever. But instead of fear, he felt clarity. He wasn't afraid of needing her anymore. He was afraid of losing her. They waited until the storm softened into a quiet breeze. When they finally stepped out from the shelter, the sky was lighter, washed clean by wind. They began walking back side by side, close enough that their steps fell into the same rhythm. Daniel didn't say much on that walk, but something in his heart whispered a truth he could no longer ignore. He didn't want her to walk away. He wanted her to walk with him. Not just today, not just through storms, but through whatever paths life carried them toward. The storm passed by morning, leaving the desert washed in soft light and cool air. Daniel woke with a sense of clarity he didn't expect. The fear that once clung to him, the fear of doing something wrong, of stepping into a world he didn't understand, of not being enough, felt quieter now. Alina's steady presence during the storm had touched something deep inside him. He kept remembering the way she said his safety mattered to her, the way she walked through the rough wind just to reach him. Nobody had ever done something like that for him before. He knew he couldn't let that kind of connection fade into uncertainty. He wanted to see her, to speak with her openly, without holding back his doubts. He wanted to show her that he wasn't running anymore, not from her world, not from his feelings, not from the discomfort of growing into something new. So that afternoon, after finishing his chores, Daniel took a quiet breath and headed toward the walking path that led to Alina's community. It was the first time he went there intentionally. He felt nervous, his hands slightly tense, his steps careful, but he kept going. The land changed slowly as he approached the edge of her community. More mesquite trees, more signs of life, children's distant laughter, the gentle rise of cooking smoke. Everything carried a warm sense of home. When he reached the small open area near the entrance, Alina appeared as if she had felt him coming. She stepped out from behind a group of trees, her expression calm but touched with surprise. "You walked here," she said softly. "Yes," Daniel replied, trying not to sound too breathless. "I wanted to talk to you." Her eyes softened with curiosity. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. Then he paused and added more honestly, "Something is right, and I need to say it." She didn't rush him. She simply nodded, giving him the quiet space he needed. Daniel took a slow breath. "The storm made me understand something. You came looking for me without hesitation. You walked into wind and dust and everything else because you cared. And it made me realize, I want to show you the same care. I want to understand your world, not stand outside it." Alina listened closely, her expression unreadable but warm. "I don't know everything about your traditions," Daniel continued, "and I know I'll make mistakes. But I want to learn. I want to walk the places that shaped you, meet the people who raised you, and understand the values that guide you." He paused, feeling his heart beating harder than usual. "And I want you in my world too. Not just as someone I meet on the trails, but as someone I walk beside. Every day." Alina didn't speak immediately. Her gaze was gentle, searching his face as if reading the truth behind his words. After a long moment of quiet, she said, "You came into my world with respect today. That means more than you think." Daniel's shoulders relaxed with relief, but he stayed silent to hear the rest. "You do not need to know everything," she continued. "You only need to be willing to understand, and you are." He felt something warm settle in his chest, something like hope. Alina stepped closer, her voice soft. "My family may take time to get used to this. They may ask questions. They may worry. But worry is only love in another shape. They will see your heart." "And your heart?" Daniel asked quietly. "What does it see?" Alina looked down, a soft smile touching her lips. "It sees someone steady. Someone honest. Someone who listens to silence the way I do. Someone I feel safe walking beside." Daniel exhaled gently, feeling the weight of many fears lift all at once. She gestured toward her community. "Will you come inside?" He hesitated, not because he feared rejection, but because he wanted to enter with respect. "If it's all right with your family," he said. Alina nodded. "Come." She led him toward the cluster of small homes. Each place held character traditional designs mixed with modern touches. Daniel noticed how the land blended with the living spaces, how nothing felt separate from nature. It reminded him of the way Alina moved through the world. Connected, thoughtful, grounded. A few people looked up as they passed. Some nodded politely. Others studied Daniel with more curiosity, though not unkindly. Daniel kept his posture calm, his hands relaxed, his eyes respectful. He felt nervous, but he also felt determined. Alina brought him to her grandmother's home, a place filled with soft light and gentle warmth. Her grandmother, a kind woman with wise eyes, welcomed them in. She listened as Alina introduced Daniel, not with elaborate explanations, but with simple honesty. This is someone who walks with care. 500 problem. Those words alone seemed to soften any questions. They talked for a while about the storm, about Daniel's work on the ranch, about the land they all shared. Her grandmother watched him with thoughtful attention, and Daniel sensed she was trying to understand the shape of his heart. He let himself be open, answering her questions calmly, speaking about his respect for their traditions. When they left, Alina's grandmother gave Daniel a gentle nod, a gesture that carried quiet acceptance. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. As they walked back toward the trail leading to the ranch, the sun dipped lower, coloring the sky in gold and soft rose. Daniel breathed in the warm evening air, feeling lighter than he had in years. Alina walked beside him, close enough that their steps touched the ground in the same rhythm. She looked peaceful, as if she too felt the shift in their path. "Thank you for coming today," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me," he replied. They stopped near her usual trail, the place where they always parted. For the first time, Daniel didn't want to walk away. He looked at her, searching for the right words. "Alina, I don't know where our lives will go. I don't know every challenge we'll face. But what I do know is that I want to choose this path with you." She looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "Then walk with me." Her words carried no pressure, no demand. They were simply a truth, offered from one heart to another. Daniel felt something shift inside him, something that felt like belonging, something that felt like home. A gentle breeze moved between them. Alina's voice softened. "Do you remember what I said the first time we met?" Daniel smiled a little. "You said I needed a woman like you." She nodded. "Do you believe it now?" Daniel stepped closer, not touching her, but speaking with quiet certainty. "No," he said softly. "I don't need a woman like you." She blinked, surprised for a moment, until he finished with a warmth that filled the air between them. "I need you, just you, and I think I always knew that." Alina's breath lifted slightly, and her eyes softened with a feeling he could read, without needing any explanation. The desert around them held its familiar silence, not empty but full of promise, of connection, of two lives finally meeting in a way that felt real and steady. Daniel didn't know everything about the future, but he knew one thing clearly. Alina was not just someone he admired. She was not just someone who understood silence. She was not just someone who found him in a storm. She was home. And when they walked forward together, side by side, the land carried them gently just as it had brought them together from the beginning.